Commissioners meeting. This is 1 a.m. Monday, February 27th, 2023. As I say, we're meeting upstairs, a little bit more of a work session format. Trying something. This is what we used to do before COVID. We're just trying something here. So there's a couple citizen inputs, emails I'm already looking at. So concerning development and sprawl at Bear Creek Road area, comprehensive plan, proposed amendment. So that's a land use item that's currently ongoing, and then also concerns with destination resort text amendment. So one of my thoughts is we might, I don't know if we're gonna, as the chair, I'm thinking we get all these emails, but we're trying to keep track of them all. Some of them just aren't even, they're like land use items that are on here. So I'm going to work with our office here and figure out if these are public. I mean, yeah, they're all public input. They're all emails we get, but I'm not sure if I'm going to do it the same in the future. So I'm not sure exactly where it's going to go, but printing all the emails out and mentioning them at the beginning of the meeting may not be the future here. And I know you may have different opinions about this, but these are all emails, they're all discoverable, and there's just lots of information to find. So I'm going to do some homework on that.
I believe one of those is speaking to an item that is going to be on our agenda on Wednesday. So I would encourage us to at least acknowledge public comments that are on topics that we will be addressing soon.
Well, so as I say, this may be the conundrum. Someone sends us an email and we read it. So we've gotten the input. And then at the beginning of a meeting, we say we've got input and we read it. So we're doing it twice. And then if there's an exciting topic and somebody gets 100 of their friends and sends 100 emails to tell us that we're supposed to do something, now we've read 100 emails, we've acknowledged 100 emails, and then it sounds like 100 people really care about a topic, which is fine. But what has that done? So I'm just pointing out that it kind of goes around in a big circle. We're not careful here. And there's a lot of passion on everything we do right now. So let's see.
One of the important things.
In fact, what might happen is it might change around, and then you can take pieces of paper and tell us what all the emails we've got. I'm just saying, as the chair, I'm seeing this as a little bit. So as I said, we'll possibly see it differently. Maybe I'll hand you the agenda item where you want to tell us the passionate people telling us for that item. Because they're just emails to us. They're not specific public testimony. They're, you know, I'm just saying that we're being lots of input come to us.
One of the important things that all of those emails do is they preface our conversations on our discussions on topics that are important to our constituents. And so
yeah, and I think
recognizing that we've gotten input on certain topics is actually, I would argue, pretty relevant and of interest to anyone who's watching our meetings.
And you just mentioned you argued, and I'm not here to argue. I'm just trying to be very business minded. So it's all good. As I say, I'm just letting you know it may change around a little bit.
So that's your prerogative as chair.
So citizen input. So we do have another a note for anybody else that has a topic that's not on the agenda. Is anybody else here on any other topics? So we do have our posted action items today. So first item is congressionally designated spending follow-up discussion. So we have talked about this a little bit already. A couple thoughts that have come up. One of them, yes, we both have both of these items. So these are just relevant to it. Sure. Okay.
Related to that, I know we're kind of shifting meetings upstairs, but commissioners, last week you asked staff to reach out to local cities and other organizations to inquire about congressionally directed spending requests that they may be submitting, and so we've done that. You have two letters before you today. One's from the city of Redmond. They're going to be requesting $2 million for the expansion of a wastewater treatment plant. And if the board is inclined, the city would love a letter of support, but certainly at the board's discretion. You also have a letter from Willow Pine Rural Fire Protection District. The district is seeking $3 million to upgrade 2 fire station facilities, and Commissioner DeBoer may have some background there. The city of Bend is planning to submit for 2 projects, one related to the Hawthorne pedestrian overcrossing, and the other is likely going to be housing related, but working not got a ton of specifics related to that second request. And then I have calls out to the city of Sisters in La Pine, but wasn't able to directly connect with staff. So that's a brief summary of what we were able to find out. I'm certainly happy to follow up as it may be helpful to the board.
So yeah, there's a couple specific community asks that are basically kind of moving forward from their entities already. I know the fire districts has already sent a letter, put a letter together that we have here. And then the city of Red is probably proceeding anyway. So these would be complementary to their asks. Is there anything else? Any other requests they did?
Not necessarily for Board of Commissioners support, but I'll mention that I've been contacted by Mosaic Medical and Heart of Oregon Corp about providing letters individually for their congressionally directed spending requests. Those are things that if there's broader interest from the board, I'm sure they would appreciate letters of support, but put them on the radar screen.
Well, it's a short time frame. This is our opportunity. And you're saying you're going to write a letter for those projects.
They asked me individually. I'm providing individual letters on behalf of myself.
And you're not bringing them to the Board of Commissioners today.
If you'd like to discuss them, you're very welcome to, but I didn't want to presume that.
But this would be the idea, is to put something on the table.
If I felt like things that I brought to the table were welcome, I would be more than willing to do so.
Also, I'm enthusiastically supportive of the Heart of Oregon Corps. I don't know, how it can be justified through this process, federal government investing in this, maybe it's educational and workforce training opportunities. I was on the board of Heart of Oregon Corps for a few years, and I really understand the mission and support. So, as I say now, I almost feel bad if you don't think you can even be providing this information to us as a Board of Commissioners.
Well, when we had our congressionally directed spending request discussion last week, there was quite a lot of consternation about congressionally directed spending requests in general as being wasteful spending that burdens future taxpayers with debt that is crippling to our country. And it's, I believe there was some discussion of very few things potentially being worthy of making congressionally directed spending requests about. So, and there was agreement. There appeared to be agreement among my fellow commissioners on that point. So I do not feel like things that I am contributing along those lines are welcome.
Commissioner Jared, any thoughts about the Heart of Oregon Corps that was mentioned here? Would you be inclined to support a list?
Well, I'd like to know what it's about. But as I said, when we ask for money from the state of Oregon, we have a balanced budget in our state, fortunately, and the federal government doesn't. And the inflation numbers were such that I believe it was Thursday or Friday morning, they were indicating that the feds are going to keep raising the rates. And, it's really not good out there. The federal debt is astronomical. So that's why I felt like, okay, if we ask for something from the state of Oregon, if we don't get it, we don't get it. But we are dealing with a balanced budget and their numbers still are looking okay.
So do you support
I'd like to see what it was.
Yeah, no, I understood. I mean, yeah.
But
Do you support the letters of support for other asks like La Pine Fire and the City of Redmond?
well, I think La Pine Fire's already done their letter.
So this would be a letter of support.
Right,
possibly
for
from
it.
the Board of Commissioners.
Yes, well, they've already sent their letter, so, I can support it. If they think they need, what is it, 3 million? I know we've given them some money, but that area has had a lot of issues. And so if they need the support, it's important. We've got to get them on solid footing. And then, of course, the city of Redmond is going towards Terrebonne, and that is incredibly important for the expansion of their wastewater treatment plant. So apparently what they need another $2 million to cover that.
So you support both of those letters?
I do.
The concept of.
The concepts of that.
And then you mentioned Harbor and Core and who? Mosaic?
Mosaic.
What was their ask?
Mosaic is asking for funds for their central campus, and our Oregon Corps is asking for funds for their central campus, both capital funds.
Yep. And so these are, there's some value here. So as I say, philosophically, I do, lean on the side of, I worry that we're deficit spending at the federal government. So I do agree with that. But the value of this congressionally designated spending request and writing letters of support is shedding light on a community need. And that if you take time to define your need, you have it on a piece of paper, even if you don't get funded here, you can get funded other ways possibly, or at least it's a goal of the organization and the board behind it to say, oh, too bad the feds didn't pay for this, but let's go because this is important. So, man, do we see the world different sometimes. I support writing a letter for each one of these organizations and the two brought up today. It's just, yeah.
I would support sending a letter for Redmond's request. And if I could be persuaded to support a letter for Heart of Oregon and Mosaic.
Yeah, so add them both to this list today. So not the Pine Fire specifically?
I have concerns that Pine Fire has faced fiscal, kind of foundational fiscal problems for many years. And we've seen their efforts to kind of patch those in ways essentially where they're asking other people to pay. Spring up on a couple of occasions, and I do not think that I think until they get their foundational fiscal situation in order, I'm not supportive of helping them ask others for money.
If you look, did I tell you this? The CAFR's, the Consolidated Annual Financial Report, in the back, the whole back section is kind of 10-year trends and jurisdiction analysis inside of Deschutes County. The Pine Fire is the only one that the only entity that doesn't have bonded debt. Did you know that? They don't have any debt associated with their current equipment or their facilities. And yes, it's hard to keep the doors open, and I'm not on their board. I just learned that. But they don't have any debt. I mean, that's exciting. So why not ask? So if I was on their board, why not ask? Somebody's going to give me money, may as well take it. And they're living a life without debt, which is pretty darn exciting and prudent for their leadership opportunities.
Trying to live a life without debt is the reason that we are going to have to borrow so much to build our courthouse in the next couple of years. Potentially $40 million of debt that will cost us an additional $25 million of interest on top of that, because we weren't smart enough to borrow money and proceed with a project.
So what's that got to do with Pine Fire or letters to support for congressionally
I would not call being in a situation where you have no bonded debt a sign of fiscal intelligence.
Okay, well, I'm just pointing out a fact. So if you look at the spreadsheets, that's the way it is. So, so you don't support this letter specifically?
I don't.
That's fine. So,
I'm very supportive of us trying to assist the Pine Fire to get their fiscal house in order in other ways. I was very supportive of their efforts to, patch their coverage by contracting with private medical transport I think they need to look deeper at their basic finances, including their assessed rates, before they start asking a lot of other people for a lot of other money. They did get a congressionally directed spending request. I believe it was just last cycle, somewhere in the range of $600,000 for some ambulances. And I'm glad for that, but I don't think that adding another congressionally directed spending request on top of that is appropriate right now.
So I'll support chair signature on this. Commissioner Adair, if you would make that motion.
Yes. I move, signature for the La Pine Rural Fire Protection District letter going, which is dated February 16th, 2023.
And I'll second it. Any other discussion? So seeing that, Commissioner Adair,
Yes.
Commissioner Chang? No. And chair votes yes. So we'll get a letter supported maybe by 2 commissioners, is what she's pointing out. And then for these other 3 requests, City of Redmond, Harbor Court, and Mosaic Medical, if I'm supportive of those.
I just need, I wanted to know amounts.
Yep,
I
as I
really
say, we don't
want
have
to.
specifics either. I agree.
I'm happy to reach out and I can draft the letter hopefully by Wednesday for your review, and then the deadline is Friday and today.
There you go.
So depending on.
Oh, we're right on time.
We are, so I'll reach out and then circle back with the board on Wednesday on their other items if that works.
Okay, yeah, so how about, letters created?
Yep.
For discussion Wednesday.
I have a draft for the Mosaic request already. We want to expand that. And the other ones, I'm just asking it like this morning. So.
Perfect.
Wonderful. Okay.
I guess the one other thing I'd like to say is that there are times when to make important strategic investments, you do need to borrow money, which I think we are learning right now with our own courthouse project. So the idea that money to fulfill congressionally directed spending allocations comes from borrowed money. For me, the criteria is basically, is it a good investment that sets you up for success and prosperity moving forward or not?
Thank you. Okay, item number 2. Thanks for joining us today. Continue discussion of a request from the City of Bend regarding Tunnel Road.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. For the record, I'm Eric Croft, Deputy County Administrator. I want to go back a little bit in time just so that in case you have people that are new to the topic that are tuning in. County and city staff have been working on the road, and the discussion was if the Tunnel Road is closed, where will people go? The ideal situation is that people go to shelter or housing, but we all know that some people that may not be an option, or others may choose not to. So the concern is, where will those folks go? Discussion among city and county staff was, well, we identify a place where people could go. The concern is that if we don't identify an area, some people will relocate to Juniper Ridge. That could be city-owned property in Juniper Ridge or county-owned property in Juniper Ridge. So in those discussions, the City of Bend made a request to the county, and City Manager Eric King is here. So if you want to chime in or correct anything, feel free to.
Eric, don't forget China Hat too, where they'll go.
Yes, and China Hat, or also ODOT property along highway or the Parkway 97. The request from the City of Bend was that the city offered up a couple of pieces of city-owned land, and the request to the county was that the county either provide the services to the people that relocated there, or hired a contractor to provide those services, and for the county to oversee that contract. The request from the city was for a response from the county by February 28th, which is tomorrow. Last week we talked to the board about the city's request at last Wednesday's board meeting, and the board had a couple of requests. And so I'll walk through the packet here. I think everybody's been provided a packet that's in the room. If you want one, it's right here.
Eric, so just taking a half a step back about the procedure here. So City's given the county a request and the county's working on a response here. And I'm just, in light of having a joint office of homeless, and Cheyenne and I spoke on Friday, it's just such a weird dynamic, as in, we've hired somebody, we have a committee, Commissioner Adair is on this committee, the joint office guidance committee for the staff of this. And I just wonder what the org chart is. So this is our work session, 3 commissioners. We have city staff and council who are here. I don't know that we're going to resolve this, but it kind of makes me wonder, well, if we have an office and we have some leadership, but then the city council asks this county commission to do something, I don't see who's leading and who's following, how this is aligned. So as I say, I don't know that this is a big roundtable discussion on this right now. But last week when you brought this up, there's a request from the city that they're expecting the county to respond. Maybe this could be done through the joint office committee and not just the city deciding to ask the county for something, even though we have the structure that we just put in place. So I don't know if that's a discussion item. I'm just sharing with you. Why do we have this system if we got these other requests and responses being asked?
And then, of course, it's further complicated because the governor made the executive orders, and now there's this map group, which is actually considered Central Oregon, so that's Jefferson, Crook, and Deschutes County. But this arrangement is actually between the city and the county. It's not Sisters, it's not LaPine, it's not Redmond. So that's why I think it was brought back down with the commissioners and with the city. And that's my understanding. So, I mean, it's further been complicated.
Well, so my thought is to say, if one of us, which you are right now, is on this committee, the joint office, hopefully there's discussions and we think of it as committee work, and then you can come in and advocate and say, hey, after we kind of talked amongst ourselves with the staff and the alignment on this issue, here's a step we could take. And then one commissioner is asking the other 2 to acknowledge it and understand what's moving forward. It just feels like we don't have, after all this, we still don't have structure. It's just somebody asking somebody else what to do.
I guess I would say that doing big, important, complicated things requires a lot of discussion at a lot of levels. Having a coordinated homeless response office provides us with staff capacity to do a lot of analysis and figure a lot of things out and flesh out a lot of ideas. But when it comes down to something that the city of Bend and the county are going to do together, we're also going to have discussions between the city and the county. So again, doing big, important, complicated things takes a lot of work among a lot of people, and I think that this is just part of it.
Okay.
The one continuity is Eric Krupp, isn't he fortunate because he's on the MAP committee and he is part of our committee. And thank you, Megan, for coming today. I appreciate it. We've had several conversations over this. So, what is the continuity? And then Cheyenne is here trying to, fill in Huddle Road. How long has it been in existence? For quite a while. It's definitely has negatively impacted that neighborhood. You can watch the news and you can see the stories all the time there are some positive stories, but there have been a lot of negative stories too. So, and then of course it's where the road is, where we want to redo the road. So that's why I'm glad that some of the city is here today, because I did think last week, that's what we need to do. It's great when we have the meetings and we're all together and then we can talk about it and bridge some of the gaps that we're seeing with what we need to do. It is in your city, but we're here to help. We've tried to help. We allocated, the 1.5 million to help the city of Bend. And then maybe now that funding is going to come back to help us but I think this should be a joint project, honestly.
So yeah, just trying to get more information out.
Going back to the memo. One thing the board asked for is a draft letter to the governor asking the state to suspend land use statutes and administrative rules related to managed camp in the county or in the rural lands outside of urban growth boundary. There's a draft letter for board consideration. It would go through the Oregon Emergency Management Office. That's the request from the governor. So that's one piece in your packet. It's a draft letter.
So I don't have that packet. None of us.
No, I do. He
Well,
did it.
we're-
He did it for us. He did it Friday because I was gonna copy it at home, and when I came in Saturday, it was here.
Okay, didn't even know about this paper, but no, I mean, I know the topics. So, well, we talked about it Friday morning, during our legislative update. I mentioned to, Representative Crop, I said, oh, well, we were on the phone together, the Zoom call. The fact that, do we just have the authority to go drop something somewhere through the governor's orders or not? And it was mentioned that, a lot of people have CCNRs or different rules and regulations, and then we have resource land outside the edge of the city. And it was just a moment when Representative Crop said, well, obviously, we're not gonna work outside the law. It's like, well, okay, there we go. We have the answer. So that's not doing it outside.
Excuse me, somebody just complained about the audio.
So,
Is there a way to improve our audio? Thank you.
so we'll stand by for a moment, figure out what's going on. We have clear audio.
So, Eric, when you said, in the meantime, managed and partially managed camping options must be explored, what is a partially managed?
Partially managed is maybe not having somebody there on site 24/7, but more of people stop by and make sure that the porta potties are serviceable, that there's water, things like that. So it's just a lower level of support. Diane, you wanna?
Sure, I think for Central Oregon,
Well, go ahead and speak up real clearly.
Really loudly so they
I don't
can
know
hear
what
you.
the status is.
Just below the monitor, so I guess you can try to project that way.
sure. So I think we all agree that for Central Oregon, we need new solutions. What we have currently available to us is either not sufficient in terms of capacity, that's both shelter and housing options. So we are looking as a community to bridge that gap. We're looking for alternatives for individuals who may have a vehicle, have a tent, have an RV, but need a safe place to be. There's a range of options that we can call different descriptions and definitions. Some of them that you've probably heard include safe parking, managed camps. The terms matter a little bit less because they've been defined differently. I think it's more important how we define them. So for instance, managed camp may imply that there's staff 24/7. Supported camp might just include a basic needs amenities station, sort of restrooms, waste disposal, clean drinking water. Many communities across the country are stepping up to provide these sort of assistance for individuals who may be very low income, especially who are disabled and facing medical conditions. And it is seen as a humanitarian response. And many counties are stepping into that space. It seems a role that fits within the public health sort of responsibilities of counties. It's certainly not limited to the city of Bend or any specific entity within the county. We know that it's a regional and national issue.
Cheyenne, one thing, that I think is really important is we add security at these camps. Whatever we're doing in the future, they need security to protect the people that live outside the camp and to protect the people that live in the camp. We even have security at our stabilization center. Brent, you're there in polo t-shirts and things, but we have security there. And honestly, we need to make sure we have security in anything that we do. It's expensive, but it's definitely protecting the people that are in there and the people that are outside.
I think it would be great if the county has financial resources to support that. There are very limited funding streams that support this range of options that are not considered necessarily shelter under emergency shelter bed standards that come down from HUD and from the state level. So any funding would need to be identified probably as a local revenue stream And the county and city could certainly, or cities could certainly look at that. My strong recommendation would be to prioritize the funding of social work staff before security and to empower peers with lived experience, so individuals who have lived experience of homelessness, to be employed for on-site management and have professional staff available for on-call response. But typically what we see is that in well-structured camps, there's not a need for ongoing 24/7 security. And that is also in line with the recommendation that I have for keeping the number of individuals at each location relatively small. One of the challenges we know is happening in places like Hunnell is that the sheer size is actually creating sort of a compounded nature of violence and some challenges for individuals who are living there, as well as community complaints from other neighbors. So I think the strategy that I see as a way of moving forward is to have a number of smaller camps that are supported and to layer on services and other mechanisms to move people through the sheltering process into stable housing.
What I was told was that the new funding from the governor is actually has money in it for sanitation services. So that's one of, if you're talking about disposal containers, et cetera, then we should be able to run that through that over $14 million.
So that, my understanding of that funding is that it is designated for prevention and for shelter beds. These sort of, RVs, tents don't qualify as shelter beds. So we probably could not use that funding. However, there are other packages that I'm aware of that are being sent down from the state level. And our office would take the responsibility of tracking those packages and leveraging and layering those projects with sufficient funding.
Okay, and we can negotiate with the city over the 1.5 that we allocated to them if we need it back.
Yeah, so is it okay for me to?
Please join us in the conversation.
Okay, you need me to come up or
They can probably hear you better.
okay.
Yeah, maybe better. We got city.
Yeah, I think
Jared King, it's out of the video, yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, I think our intent would be to take a portion of that 1.5 million that the county allocated up to 100,000 that we could have the county retain to advance the concept that Cheyenne's talking about.
How much did you say we could retain?
100,000.
100.
I guess I'd say depending on how many sites we're talking about, kind of what the city's contribution is on those various sites. I'd like to be able to discuss that number being higher than 100,000.
I think for us, we have the concern of all of the facilities that we've purchased, and so for congregate, non-congregate, the outdoor shelter that should be permitted this week, that's at 27th and Bear Creek. We've made financial commitments, so all of the funding that we have is sort of spoken for. We really don't have any more discretionary funds beyond the 100,000. However, if some of the 14 million that was referenced with the governor's package, we could use some of those resources to help with other things, and maybe, but right now, the 100,000 is all the city has available to offer for this specific, without knowing, because we're unsure with some of the ongoing funding needs with some of the other facilities that we've purchased with ARPA dollars or used one-time dollars for operations.
So Eric, maybe get us on track here. I mean, if there's anything else to be said, please say it here at the table, but what are the decision points for today? I'm just thinking we could talk about everything all day here.
Sure. Decision point number one is the draft letter to the governor through ODM.
So yeah, let's take that as the board of commissioners right now. Do you support this letter?
As written, I don't support this letter.
Do you support the concept of this letter?
It depends.
Okay, go ahead and share your thoughts.
Let's pull out the 90,000 foot level here. What we're trying to do is create opportunities in areas outside of the city limits that are not zoned rural residential. Areas within city limits and within rural residential, we are allowed under HB 2006 to do emergency siting. So what we really need to understand is whether there are sites that are of great interest to us are outside city limits that are zoned something besides rural residential. And I believe that there are. The question then is, what kind of authorization do we need to be able to use those sites? One of the sites that I have heard about, all we might need is a county safe parking ordinance to be able to use for setting up RVs there. And if that is all we need, then we actually don't need any flexibility from the governor to proceed. That's my concern about this letter. And the way that the letter is phrased, it's quite broad and sweeping.
Yeah, let's not worry about that letter. Let's get clear about your thought there then. So we're talking about, so we've got a map in here. It talks about public property, city of Bend, Deschutes County, outside the UGB resource land. I think all of this is resource land. Do we have a path for safe parking program on any of these parcels?
For that, we would have to ask.
Yeah, because I don't know.
County legal. The site I'm talking about is the site that Central Oregon Villages has worked so carefully and diligently to tee up for these purposes on the east side of Bend, just northeast of the Warden Abbey roundabout.
Is that 9 acres?
Yes.
So that was in the paper the other day saying, well, why don't they just go use the 9 acres? I don't have direct information on that. So this is a problem if we're like, well, why don't we go do this? Does anybody want to share about this 9 acres and get clear on what that is then?
Do
you have a feel for it?
It's a privately owned parcel that has been presented by private citizens as a potential option for future development. It could be, they're open to a range of development options, which could look like currently safe parking, establishment of pallet shelter or tiny home structures with a community room for delivery of services and for access to amenities, all the way through to affordable housing.
It's outside the city or?
Yeah.
What's it zone?
Zoned EFU. Yeah, and Central Oregon Villages mentioned this property to me a year ago. And I said, until we get HB 2006 tweaked, I don't think we have a pathway for setting up outdoor shelter out there on EFU zone land, even though it's super close to the city limits. I think with HB 4079 project that 8 Homes is pursuing, it's a half mile or less from the UGP. So I didn't think we had a viable path without modification of HB 2006. But come to learn, through discussions at the county level that at least for safe parking, we might be able to just pass the safe parking ordinance and at least move that component forward. I don't think that safe parking ordinance allows us to proceed with the pallet shelters and other components of this project. But I do think that conceivably a safe parking ordinance, which is something that's entirely within our authority to do, could allow up to 1.5 acres of this site to be available for hosting people's RVs that they're nursing home and living in.
So remember about 2 years ago, you came in, you raised your hand, you said you want to be on the emergency task force committee. You said, I really want to do this. And then we waited almost a whole year and you gave us a document that said we have a vision statement and an outline. It's a draft. And I think that document's still in that draft. And now the city of Bend, we created the office and we're here, we're looking at this, and now we're coming up with a different idea. I mean, somehow this needs to stop going in circles here. And this is weird.
Don't try to say that this is a delayed, stalled process.
No,
The
but
Emergency Homeless Task Force produced a plan that was finalized by the Emergency Homeless Task Force. It sits waiting for the Coordinated Homeless Response Office to decide how much of that plan they want to adopt into the HB 4123 strategic. But that plan was done. Things like safe parking were identified in that plan. And
I'm just saying, it's a year after that even now.
well,
And now we're trying to go down this path, which we figured out the other day. And now you're coming up with another
for as
idea.
long as I've been on this board of commissioners, you have been trying to blame the state land use planning system for all of our housing and homelessness problems, and saying that we need to blow up the state land use planning system to do it. Meanwhile, I have been saying.
I've acknowledged them as hard stops. That's all I've ever done, is acknowledge that these are all hard stops in the
I have
system.
mentioned a small tweak to HB 2006 as a fix that could allow us to start to do outdoor shelter in the near vicinity of the city of Benton for at least a year. And neither of my fellow commissioners has supported exploration of that idea. So if you want to know why this idea hasn't gone anywhere yet, it is because this group has been unwilling to look at real, concrete, specific, incremental solutions that can help us solve our problems, because you want to make it about how terrible the state is. You want to go there? I'm happy to go there. You want to argue about, in the grand scheme, I'm happy to argue about that. But number one reason I'm here right now is to do concrete problem solving. So I would appreciate it if you would focus on that as well.
So I'm thinking of a process here. There's a proposed letter to go to the governor's office saying we need some flexibility on resource land outside the cities to site something. And you're saying, no, this isn't the right place to go. We should go somewhere else.
This says,
Why are we here today doing this? You could have done this all last week and come up with some little bit more of a mature idea about getting this going. And if you think I'm stalling, I mean, so we got to be careful here, because if you think I'm actively stalling
the reason
your
we
ideas,
have, the reason
we're
we
not
have
communicating very
ideas,
well.
the reason we have any concrete ideas to work on right now is largely because of my work.
Well,
Okay.
let me acknowledge this.
The problem with this letter is that it says the governor suspends state statutes and administrative rules which prohibit the siting of managed and partially managed homeless camps on all rural lands outside UGBs.
Now, hold on. I didn't create this letter. So if you're going to attack me for creating this letter, I didn't do that.
When you were just pushing me to sign on to this letter.
So let's
5
practice
minutes ago.
communicating.
So if you want to know why I'm not ready to sign on to this
Did you see it?
letter,
I crossed out the word all too. I mean, so we're not communicating very well here. Okay. So this is a starting point created by staff. Yeah. And we can possibly use this. I didn't do anything with this. In fact, you saw he handed it to me as we started here. I didn't even see it before this. So if there's an assumption here, let's maybe back up.
all right, if you're ready to stop poking and prodding, I'll come back to the specific language of this letter.
Well, but hold on. We are on a different topic. You said you're not ready for this letter because we need to do something else.
Well, what I was saying is that we need to actually think about the specific pieces of land that present real opportunities and do the land use stuff that's necessary for those sites. If 1.5 acres within the Gales property, on the east side of Bend is the only real opportunity outside of the UGB, then maybe all we need to do is think about a safe parking ordinance, which I think we should do anyway.
Well, I definitely believe the safe parking ordinance is important for us. And I did already talk to Mayor Keebler and Councilor Perkins about safe parking, and how I just had a conversation this morning. Pastor Rick Russell called me about some issues and was giving me update on what's happening in Redmond, and it really is working in Redmond. It's happening, and I would just love to see more safe parking in Bend. So I'm hoping that, like Megan, will be able to take that and pick that up and go with it, because that program actually gets people, this is what we're really talking about, is people that don't want to be homeless, that want to get back in. And, you know, we have so much compassion and generosity in our community that we really just need to use it a bit more and really help those people that want to be helped. And then the emergency group that was meeting, I really felt that we needed Dear Ridge. We needed Dear Ridge then. And if you saw the letter in the paper yesterday about civil commitment, we still need Dear Ridge. We need something to change in our state. We have, you know, we've got a lot to worry about here in Oregon because we have such a high addiction rate. Well, we're number 2 in the nation, and yet our residential treatment beds are last. So, and I know there's a lot of people that are out there that seriously need some help, that a couple days at St. Charles are not going to make the difference. So that's why I always bring it back to substance use disorder, mental illness. And Friday I was on a call with the entire state, with the OEM and Andrea Bell, and Dr. Sharon Mirren, who's a commissioner from Multnomah County, looked at the governor's executive orders and said, oh my gosh, those numbers won't even cover Port Multnomah County. Where did the governor come up with those numbers? She goes, I see it all the time, the substance use disorder, the mental illness. You know, she works in an ER in Portland. So that you can pull up her testimony for Friday, but I feel like we have a way bigger problem here. We need to focus on what we can do as county commissioners. And I believe we need to work with the city of Bend. And now we're talking about only going out of Bend and not using like that 1 acre piece of property. I realized it wasn't ideal, but it was originally offered.
Oh, no, I think that's coming yet today. So
It
we're
is
just trying to
coming
get,
yet?
yeah, we just didn't get there yet.
Okay,
So we're
well,
just getting kind of stuck in a, so I support this letter and dialing it back a little bit. We may be on the same page. This is interesting that, I mean, I crossed out all rural lands also. When I look at the second paragraph, I say, while we share the governor's desire to reduce instead of eliminate, consider. I mean, Cheyenne, should we use the word eliminate unsheltered homeless? Because we're just going to manage it. There's people, I know a gentleman that's been out the doors for 20 years, and I don't think he's ever come in.
I think it's an aspirational goal that may not be possible, but I think it's probably just a matter of semantics.
Yeah, okay. So I would use the word reduce unsheltered homeless, recognize that doing so will take time, so get rid of a great deal of. And in the meantime, managed camping options may be restored. So just replacing the word reduce or eliminate to reduce. Would you support that, Commissioner? That's fine. And then removing the words a great deal of, because time is just time. So then, I think we may be on the same page with the next statement. You know, executive order, request to OEM, Deschutes County governor about a request the governor suspended state statute. So I don't know what exactly we're doing here. We're looking for the authority to decide possibly on resource lands outside the city. So I'm just saying, and that could be generically for these 9 acres or another parcel also. We're in the same spot. Well, I mean, I'm thinking Bend, Redmond, Citrus, and Ohio. They're all kind of different. You know, we don't have EFU the same way around other cities other than Bend. You know, Redmond does have EFU, but not at the edge like it is here. Citrus is mostly federal land on one side and some large ranches on the other side. So there's not the same dynamics in any of the cities. So we could probably take this paragraph, this long middle paragraph, and just dial it into some opportunities on resource lands outside of UGBs or outside of Bend if you want to get specific.
I would rewrite the whole sentence. Something like provide, we request that the governor provide opportunities for the siting of managed and partially managed homeless camps on rural lands outside, but in the near vicinity of UGBs, to the maximum extent possible within state statute and administrative rules. I think what we're seeking is flexibility. We're not seeking to overturn the state.
But I've come to the conclusion that, yeah, maybe this is under emergency orders. You know, I'm not saying we should, do something just outside of the rules, and that's where we were last week. We said, well, you know, if we're going to do something outside the city, let's do it under an emergency order. But it looks like we don't even have that authority. We can't just sit here in partnership with the city of Bend and say, we've got an emergency, so we're going to do this. We don't have that authority, is what was determined. That's my understanding. So now this is the path.
Has that been legally determined? That whether we can do, whether we can take some kind of emergency action.
Yeah, as far as with the executive orders, if that extended any type of authority for us as the county to do anything, that would not allow us to do that. So it's very specific. The executive orders talk about state agencies. The only thing that it does talk about is local agencies identifying any type of additional emergency measures that might need to be taken, and that hence the letter that was drafted.
Yeah, so I think this is
rather than asking the governor to suspend state statute and administrative rules, I think phrasing it as, you know, seeking flexibility in order to do citing and, you know, specifying the zone in which we are interested in that. I mean, we could even say within 1 mile of urban growth boundary, to make our requests seem more less sweeping and frightening to people.
So as I say, that's fine with me. I mean, there's with the input, how about we have this letter, you know, reformatted a little bit for review, maybe on Wednesday, if you want to do it like that.
Yeah, we can bring it back.
Is there support for a letter through OEM to ask for more flexibility?
Well, that's where it's supposed to go.
There you go.
Garrett Matthews.
Pending what the letter looks like. That sounds like something I could support.
Okay. So we'll look at the words very specifically. So then is the letter intended on having these maps attached?
No, the maps were in response to requests from the commissioner about land outside of the urban growth boundary. Christie helped pull this, or Christie and Dad pulled this together. The first map shows land owned by the city of Bend, Teal, the county in orange, there's BLM up there. And then the next map, the second map shows the boundary and the blue hash. And the third map shows the parcel sizes. So that was separate from the letter.
Yeah, so that's just for sets of place for all of us.
Yeah.
So they're all north of Bend proper, the city proper. Kind of the 97 corridor.
Yeah, and on the map, 97's in red, and you see like the railroad in the black and gray.
Okay. And then supported camp.
The last couple pages are just kind of a draft conceptual plan of what a supported camp could look like. Piece of that is Cheyenne kind of laid out some conceptual idea of what the 1 acre could look like.
Okay, so this is 1 acre. So supported camp program model responsibilities, and then camp. So this is a different topic now. Correct. Okay, so this is getting back to 1 acre.
Right, I can recognize that as
Concept
an
layout.
acre, right?
There we go.
Before we leave the letter, I also suggest that, to kind of lay it out or set the stage for the governor as well. We could even say, because they may not know, House Bill 2006 from 2021, does allow citing, emergency citing of homeless shelter on rural residential lands in the county. But we, just kind of spell it out for them that we actually have lands outside of our cities that are not rural residential zone, but are pretty close in that would make very suitable sites. So that's fine. That could point out to them that actually just a really simple tweak, like an amendment to, a revision or amendment of HB 2006 might be what we need, which is, as I mentioned, something that I have been suggesting for more than a year, which could have been on our legislative agenda as a county. It could be on our legislative agenda as a county right now.
Well, so there's a little disconnect from what you're saying here. So are you saying you're sharing information with me and I'm not receiving it? I mean, I don't understand when you say
You were basically, you were like, oh, you had the such and such idea before, and now you're coming with something completely different.
No, but I mean, you're referring to the fixing 2006, and is there an idea out there that has been mentioned in a joint meeting that as I say,
I have mentioned
I don't
to my
understand.
colleagues on the commission multiple times that if we got some minor modifications to HB 2006, it would allow us to do some things in the near-in vicinity to our cities.
Well, and I'll acknowledge that I've never understood that before now. I mean, if you said in a public meeting to me, either I wasn't listening or it wasn't clear what you were saying. So I'm just pointing this out. I don't understand how you can say that today. And I would be like, not ever thinking I've ever heard that before. So I just let you know, we're not communicating very well. And maybe it's my fault for not listening. I don't know.
Do you want to ask staff to go back through, to do a search through past meeting minutes?
If you want to find that, I wouldn't ask that, but if you want to, that would be interesting.
Well, I guess what's important to me is that you're not saying that I never saw it. I never said it before. If you never heard it before.
Well, that's my point. I'm just
that's one
amazed.
thing,
I'm like, oh,
but, interesting. I just want to reemphasize that I've said it multiple times.
I prefer to say managed camping options instead of partially. I think I think people that live here are really tired of the lack of management of what's happened, safety, public safety. And so I think partially managed doesn't quite hit it.
that's for the letter.
Yeah, for the letter. I just really want.
So we're going to have a letter. We're going to look for common ground and words on Wednesday.
Yes, we'll bring it back on Wednesday with changes discussed.
Please.
And now we have a ask from the city. Thank you for being here today.
So really, probably the most concept or refined concept is to take a 1 acre parcel that's owned by the city of Bend. It's located within the city limits, and for the county to hire a nonprofit or a partially managed or supported camp. The idea would be that the nonprofit obtain insurance. Of course, that cost would be included in the contract between the county and the nonprofit. So at least we have an area identified where people who don't end up at shelter or housing could go.
Our office has been in discussions with a number of nonprofits that had previously raised their hands and made proposals either to the city of Bend or to the county, at least at the staff level, to circulate this conversation around identifying parcels that could be shifted from either raw land or parking lots or gravel space to a supported camp of some version, either safe parking, managed camp, anything within that general definition range. We do have a representative from the board of Central Oregon Villages. They already oversee some very successful projects that are very similar to this, so they have experience with that. And our office has an interest strategically in line with the strategic plans already developed to expand local capacity within our nonprofit providers so that it doesn't fall to the cities or to the county to develop that capacity ourselves, but rather that we provide the funding as well as support and oversight around compliance reporting needs. So I think that's an appropriate role for local governments to play rather than to take that work on ourselves and absorb it into our workflow.
So we're talking about a 1 acre parcel. There's a proposed concept layout. And you mentioned Central Oregon Villages. Is there a engagement by Central Oregon Villages to possibly be an operator for this?
Yes, my understanding is their executive director is bringing these same materials to their board for review and discussion, and that they would let me know if they're open to a contract, should this meeting move in the direction of opening that door.
Chuck, do you want to say anything? Any comments?
I'm fairly confident being on the board that our board will support going forward with supporting an effort for that.
This is Chuck Hemingway. So you're on the board of Central Oregon Villages,
Yes.
and you've been involved. We've talked over the years now. You've been involved for a bunch of different things. And then also, are there? So I'm going to ask you a question. Are there current operations that Central Oregon Villages is implementing? Any camps or what?
We have an ongoing safe parking site at Bend Church. And we've got the pallet shelters in place at 27th and Bear Creek, ready to put them up and move people in as soon as we get the thumbs up from the city.
So Central Oregon Villages is doing safe parking currently at one church or multiple?
How many spots are in that church?
Two
Just two RVs,
two pallet shelters.
two pallet shelters, okay.
And then I was asked about Bear Creek earlier today, because it was last June that the congregation kind of said, yeah, let's host this, let's do that. And that's when the pastor notified, I think, you and I were involved with it. So that was what, 8 or 9 months ago that it was a go. It's like, oh, good, this is going to happen. And the shelters are on the ground over there,
Ready to be assembled, yes.
but we don't have authority by the city yet.
The permit should be issued this week.
So it's happening right now.
Yep.
Okay. Well, yeah, so Central Oregon Villages is coming to possibly be an operator for this 1 acre parcel.
And I think it's worth mentioning that typically what we'll see in communities is that the first of any type of project takes a while to develop. I think we've seen that with the first pallet shelters. What's great about it though is that it gives us as a region more competency in terms of executing on these projects. So we can expect that future similar projects can use that same template for how to move quickly through the permitting process and planning processes, as well as the operational capacity to oversee these types of properties. And we also are in those process, essentially forming the partnerships that make these types of projects successful. We have good data about how these projects have leveraged other service providers, including REACH, the county's own behavioral health team. So it's not just Central Oregon Villages, it truly is a collaboration, as well as Mosaic Medical comes out with their van. So we could expect that future parcels identified for supported camps would be able to be activated more quickly and would be more successful more quickly because of the template that they've created. So I really appreciate their willingness to move forward with this new to us model. It's not new to the country, but they used a lot of examples from throughout the country and brought those here locally so that we can be building on that as a foundation.
So yeah, stepping back, I mean, the goal wouldn't be to just keep building supported camps. I mean, that's a terrible transitional, not long-term option. So I'm just pointing out, it's not a great solution in the end. It's just transitional. There's a lot of land when we go back to these maps and look at the public ownership north of Bend. And man, it'd be great if we could come up with some kind of larger capacity, permanent, supportive housing. I mean, there's all kinds of words we could use there, but I'm just saying there's something. So in the end, I'd like people to be stable long-term, and these aren't obviously that. So hopefully we're not going to do too many of these.
I agree with you. I think when we look at the total number of individuals and families that we know is experiencing homelessness, many of whom are living unsheltered, at least 80%, this is the fastest and least expensive way that we can provide some alternative to lack of shelter and lack of safe parking. At the same time, it's not about picking one over the other. At the same time, concurrently, we are planning to build pipelines for affordable and supportive housing as well as shelter beds. We're doing all of that work. It does take time though, especially with a community like ours that through COVID saw a lot of strain in the nonprofit community to take on new programs and to expand our capacity. So we're now trying to shift gears and make investments in those nonprofits so that they can continue doing great work and expand that work. As we build out those pipelines, these bridge programs will help to ensure that people have access to safe amenities, access to community, access to services. All of those also help build the next connections to shelter, either congregate or non-congregate shelter options, as well as supported housing.
So Cheyenne, the model given here has 20 RV spots, 10 tents. What is our whole world population right now?
So we understand it to be, and it fluctuates, so it's anywhere from 80 to 100. That's inclusive of both Hunnell and Clawson. And we have a weekly provider meeting that's identified that there's approximately half of those individuals who are medically fragile. And so one recommendation that was
What does medically fragile mean? Does that mean mental health issues?
it could, although medical would probably include either physical disabilities, diagnoses, whether they're accessing medical care on a regular basis, but maybe depending on durable medical equipment, for instance, CPAP machine, something they need to plug in, a mobile wheelchair. So a number of the individuals we're seeing out at Hunnell are either seniors, disabled, or medically fragile otherwise. I've met individuals who have a cancer diagnosis or are waiting on surgeries because of frostbite. There's a number of individuals we would like to see come closer into settings within town where they can continue accessing regular medical care rather than be pushed out into rural areas and become disconnected from those services.
So are you saying that the South Bend location still fits that criteria?
It does, yeah.
Okay.
We can locate a transportation route. We've been in conversation with COIC and they're open to exploring changing transportation routes.
We get, what is it, like $10 million a year in funding for buses. So yes, I know. That's one thing that I believe can happen pretty fast.
Yeah, and I have a commitment from Mosaic Medical to bring their mobile van to this location as well. So individuals could receive services directly at the site, which makes it much easier for individuals to navigate to services, especially when they're on site and they don't have to figure out transportation.
So does this site need, in your opinion, some kind of grading? I heard it was a bit hilly.
I believe it does.
Do we have to get a permit for that in the city?
So we have a safe parking program the city has adopted that allows for flexibility. And this would follow, we would go through the process of applying for a safe parking permit. And so whatever, if there's grading and things like that, it would follow that traditional process.
And we have several contractors that have stepped forward and said that they would be willing to do this pro bono.
And I know that community is going to be really concerned with security. So I don't see where, it said it's going to support clients with move-in, et cetera, but on the first page, reduce crime. How do we know it's going to reduce crime without security there?
So there's many ways that I think supported camps can provide safety measures without involving formal security. Often those include community agreements, working with staff to identify any concerning behavior, addressing, especially with the individuals who may be coming into these locations, they are themselves very vulnerable. And so they will often work closely together alongside professional staff to identify safety measures that might include lighting, security cameras, and that really benefits all of them and their neighbors. So I think while funding currently doesn't support the cost of 24/7 or really any security, there are opportunities to employ peers with lived experience, individuals who have experience in homelessness, as well as professional staff to be responsive to emergencies or any concerns of the neighbors. If the board is more comfortable identifying certain criteria, we could certainly make a prioritization for seniors and for those with disabilities or medical vulnerabilities. And that would be screened through the coordinated entry system, which is a countywide as well as tri-county system. So we could identify prioritization for individuals who are especially vulnerable.
Do you think we should? mean,
That's my recommendation.
doesn't that make sense?
Yeah, so I would take a recommendation on that for, the population as we know it, what would be a good mix. We probably want to offer this resource to a cross section of needs, but definitely put some priorities in there too. Is there any thought of electricity or utilities?
Those can all be made available, like relatively quickly made
Yeah,
available.
because we're not
throughout
talking
the
about
state.
that yet per se. Yeah.
I'm not concerned about the development opportunity. I know that that will be easily resolved. We have excellent staff, both at the city and county, who are willing to work together, as well as contractors who have made themselves available, and even some engineers and architects who can jump in if there's specialty grading requirements.
How do we make sure that Revere doesn't happen? Where all that, everything gets dumped there. The city pickup trailer was actually there Friday, I think, when I was driving by, and it was already full. But all this, how can we convince and follow through that part of it's not going to look messy? I mean, I know we're going to provide trash disposal service. I mean, are they going to be picked up all the time? It has to, that's part of life, is you have to pick up after yourselves.
Yes, a couple of things. One, supported camps would have contracts with waste disposal, including harm reduction like sharps containers. If someone's a diabetic and using needles or has them for other purposes, making sure that the grounds are safe for both staff and for clients as well as guests. I do think that in terms of encampments like we're seeing at Revere or down near Crooks, the thing that will prevent that is supportive camps like this. If we create spaces where people are legitimately able to survive and connect to services that are needed to address hoarding and cluttering behaviors, other responses to trauma, we will see a reduction in the unmanaged and unsanitary encampments that we're seeing that are not safe for human habitation, that are not, that become a community nuisance. If we step back a little bit, the whole purpose of this approach to this alternative approach to encampment management is to get out of a cycle of endless closures and shifting individuals from BLM land to county land to city land to ODOT land. I get calls from agencies all the time saying, as one closure happens, a new encampment shows up. And that's because individuals don't have anywhere to go that is connected to services and that has access to sanitation or hygiene amenities. So this response is both a humanitarian response, it is a sanitation response, it's an environmental response. Everyone benefits. There's really no downside to this.
The public safety response.
Public safety, it is known to reduce crime, to reduce hazards, to reduce trash accumulation, a range of sort of public nuisances that come up around unmanaged encampments and unsupported encampments. This does the opposite and helps people on that path towards staying connected and getting the services they need.
Can you comment on the status of discussions with neighboring landowners? The neighborhood and kind of their awareness and comfort level with this proposal?
I can't because I don't believe those conversations have happened.
I know, so this site, the ODOT parcel, we've had some conversations publicly with council on this site, and staff have reached out to Les Schwab, is the neighbor there, and have had conversations with them. We just went through a process to acquire the property. In fact, it closes in the next week or so. So there's been conversations where it's sort of surrounded by roadways on all sides, with the exception of Les Schwab to the north.
So this is our second time talking about this. Goal is to make a decision about the county operator or looking for an operator for this parcel owned by the city.
Yes, if the board wants staff to move forward, I see two main actions. The board could direct staff to work with the city on an IGA to bring back, of course, to be approved by the board and the city council, or I'm not sure, the city manager. And then the other action would be to direct staff to work with Central Oregon Villages if their board supports it on a contract. So I see those two main actions if the board supports moving forward with this concept.
So then, yeah, just be in the spot where why is the city work? Central Oregon Villages wasn't mentioned before today, so I don't know if maybe they just popped up. But yeah, so kind of gets back to the original why, as in it's the parcel owned by the city in the city. And now it looks like there may be a good relationship for an operator coming. What's the reason for the ask? And maybe this is council ask at this point. And there's only one here for.
Well, from a staff perspective, so we have, and Megan can cut in, but we have 3 or 4 kind of facilities that we have one person doing all of that work. We've got the navigation center, lighthouse, we have the stepping stone shelter, rainbow, out the Central Oregon. We already have an existing contract. We are at our capacity from a contract management perspective. So we're happy to share templates and things, but we would like some help. And whether that be the coordinated office, it could be the coordinated office if there's capacity there, or if there, I know the county recently we've been tracking, kind of hired a project manager given the number of encampments that are occurring. So the thought was, again, we think that this, I think you've said too about scaling, there's just probably a larger need or something that we need to get involved in. A lot of the encampments are in rural areas. So we thought this would be a good project to partner with the county on.
And in terms of capacity, this office was established with the intention to have 2 to 3 staff members. So myself, we have 1 in progress, hopefully coming up in the next week or 2, we'll be able to extend an offer. And then there's funding available for a 3rd person. I do also suspect that there will be more funding available either as part of this pilot as an extension of funding or as part of the governor's packages. So we would be looking to adjust our workload to identify opportunities for piloting projects like this. They may either be time limited, so to the extent that the emergency order stays in place for, 9 months now, we could, establish these camps for that length of time, see how they go, use it as a pilot, and as housing and shelter options become available, shift away from that model and towards supporting, behavioral health supports in permanent supportive housing or shelters. I don't see this as establishing a response for the long term necessarily. You've said this. I don't want to create more infrastructure than is necessary, but I do see a value in establishing an emergency response that is urgent and scaled, so that we're not just continually climbing behind the issue. I think there's a need to be proactive and responsive to what we're seeing is an evolving crisis.
Well, so when we say it's under the county, is it under the joint office? Or is it under our legal and Eric? I mean, yeah, so now what?
It would either be under admin, the joint office, or possibly health services. I mean, even if it's under the joint office, it's still, the contract comes to the county. It's still a county contract and still the procurement rules of the county. So even if it's the joint office, in this instance, the joint office would be acting as a county department compared to the contractor.
Do we have a sense of how much of the infrastructure and operating costs for a year $100,000 will cover?
We'll look to the teams that are currently overseeing those contracts. I don't know what the city has established as a baseline. I know some of those are startup costs versus ongoing.
Yeah, some of the sites. So it's a little different model with Central Oregon Villages on the Dare Creek property. It's with pallet structure. So there's the actual, those are structures in the site clearing and the operating. So it's a little different contract than something like this would be. So it's a little, but there are I'm sure some things to be gleaned from that.
I would say as an estimation that the 100,000 for a 9-month window, if we're looking at extending through the emergency order, would cover all of the initial setup and startup costs, assuming there are pro bono contracting, supports like grading or gravel, maybe connect electrical and other connections, as well as probably a full-time staff person who would be available to support the location. That could be a case manager or a split between a case manager and a supervisor. I think as Central Oregon Villages grows in its capacity, I'm assuming the staffing structure will change. but this could create some scaling efficiencies for their organization as they're growing from a one-person show to a several-person show. So I think there's benefits both to them as an agency as well as to our office to see how we can grow this kind of capacity locally.
I definitely don't want to nickel and dime the incredible service provider organizations that are really doing the hard work associated with making these projects happen. But that's part of why I was asking about that.
Yeah, and our office will continue to provide technical assistance to nonprofits like theirs, connect them to supports that are being made available through the state, which are, I think, substantial in terms of investment, as well as doing a landscape review of funding that comes available or that could be made available for either further deeper investments or longer investments in this kind of project.
Chuck, question, is there any contracting right now for the safe parking, or would there be contracting for the other pallet village at Bear Creek? To the city, I guess, is my question.
Yeah, we already have a contract.
We have a contract for 27th Bear Creek. And there's a contract between Ben Church and Central Oregon Villages for the safe parking.
So now we have the same operator working with the city already, and the city's still asking us to contract with you. That's kind of a roundabout situation.
I think the intent was to try to scale this, like there's other county properties beyond just the city to try to scale this up. So it seemed like from a supportive services, this is very different than the models that we talked about with the.
Well, so we're getting down to it. You say so this is the first of many.
Well, I think based on what we've talked about is smaller sites to provide, there's quite a few folks that are out in, at least what we've heard from the joint office with the county-owned land, Redmond owned land. So the solution sets are beyond just the city of Bend with those projects.
So we're starting something new here, which is going to scale. I mean, we don't have that information laying on the table here. We're like trying to sneak into this thing with, I don't know, different expectations. It looks like from my point of view.
We're all trying to figure it out as we go. And you know, you and I are both aware that there's 80 to 100 people living at Huddle right now. There's tens of people at least living east of 17th and Redmond, and then there's a pretty large number of people out in the runway protection zone as well. So I mean, you know, translating that into exactly how many sites and how much capacity at each site and how many operators, that is something that we all need to figure out. But like we're all aware of the scale of the need for, you know, some kind of interim measure at this moment in time, while you're trying to figure, you know, we're trying to figure out in the long term how to get people into transitional and permanent housing.
So once things start to move, the layout and density here may not be very inviting for a lot of folks. And I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
For individuals living there?
For individuals that are dispersed all around the community or outside the town, this may not be an ideal situation for a lot of them. Some people are going to be drawn right to it. Those are probably going to be the you know, people that just love a little bit of support and they're ready for it and they need it. But I'm just saying, I have a hunch there's a lot of folks that are just going to disperse in other directions anyways.
So
But
Hunnell-
we don't know this. I'm not an expert in it. I'm just throwing out ideas.
Yeah, no, and I think it's, we always want to be looking at creating a menu of options so that folks who may feel disconnected, there's certainly a lot of veterans who feel, you know, wary of working with either authorities or, you know, service providers that may be a little bit more formal. So informal outreach has been a great way to engage individuals. I would say Hunnell is already relatively condensed, and so is more similar to a site like this. This certainly provides more protections rather than large trucks and equipment running right through the road. There's going to be a, you know, sort of safety.
Well, I don't know. I'm just throwing out ideas, and maybe a vision now that, for the population in Hunnell, this is gonna be wonderful for some of them, but some of them are just gonna disappear. Going somewhere, no matter what we do, no matter what's offered, it's my
And that, I often think that we're focused on a bell curve. We're looking at solutions that meet about 80% of individuals' needs. I would say there's individuals who currently may be living in encampment settings, for whom any shelter option is not actually sufficient. What they need is like what has been mentioned, mental health beds, respite care, more intensive, they have higher acuity and have more intensive care needs. So this is not going to suit that population. And there may be people who want to live out in the woods. That's not what this, but if we can start creating a model that addresses what 80% of individuals need, which is a safe place to their next step.
Well, that helps me. Just saying the word bell curve, it's like, oh, okay, that helps, just kind of work.
But see, the bell
Trying
curve
to do.
really needs to cover substance use disorder, which is a really big issue here. What would you say the maximum population would be at the 1 acre site then?
I have taken a shot that I think is very similar to the one that was developed by Central Oregon Villages. I think we want to ensure that any trailer or RV can get in and out safely and that we still have emergency access. So that's
what you've designed.
Yeah, as well as the ability for on-site parking of the mobile vans. If we have street outreach show up or navigation teams, as well as the medical van, which is a longer van. If they have the ability to come in and exit, then we have a space for them designated, as well as like trash pickup. All of those functions need to be able to happen in that space. It may not eventually look like this, but I think that the concept of not too many, but enough that it's a scaled option. We don't want to have 3 individuals living here. We'd like to see, 30 spaces. And the assumption is that each month a few folks are moving into their next step. So then a few more folks can come in. These are not meant to be end destinations. This should be a process folks go through, get connected to services and move on.
If the board conceptually supports this, what are we looking at in terms of a timeline? The city will close on the property for another week or two. And there's a lot of pieces to put into place. So what is
We just signed it Friday, so it should be this week.
Okay, so the property has just been acquired, but what is the timeline look like? Should the board support this concept? We have a sense of what that.
I think there's a couple of work streams that can happen concurrently. One is contracting and ensuring the funds are delivered. Another is the physical space and getting it graded and ready. Another would be communication and outreach, both with clients as well as their future neighbors. So I think all of those processes would take 1 to 2 months. I think because of that, we would probably be looking to negotiate, what process makes sense for clients to get physically from their encampment setting over to this location. But I think all of that could happen on a relatively expedited process. I think there's a real urgency for a lot of the reasons discussed. Hunnell is, facing closure. We are also hopeful that this is not the only parcel considered. The eventual idea would be to have several sites so that if there's folks who want to be a little bit further out of town, maybe aren't quite ready to engage, but need a safe place to be, connect with community members. For individuals who are medically fragile and need access to, immediate care, we could create more connected locations. But clearly, you said this, Commissioner Gabon, is that one location is not sufficient. We also don't want to create hundreds. That's not the goal either. So finding that spot that, I would say up to 100 spaces at maybe 3 to 5 locations would be sufficient in terms of building a system that can respond to the individuals who are living unsheltered and need a next step that we don't yet have, which is shelter and housing. We're working on those supports, but those rungs in the ladder haven't really been built yet.
So I'll just jump if I can. I'll just jump in. So if we have agreement on Wednesday to send the letter to the state, we don't know what the state's response is going to be or how long that may take, but that's one rung of the ladder. This property could be a second one, and the other one that the commissioners have even more conceptually discussed, but not even necessarily in a public meeting, is do we create our own safe parking program? And is that something that the board would be interested in having a work session on? And well, submitting an agenda packet by Wednesday for next week is too soon, and then the board doesn't be 13th, 15th, but sometime later in March in any event. That could be another rung of the ladder. That could be another step if the board is interested. I don't want to get ahead of the board, but that we can also begin to take these steps.
And that would also give me time to bring those same materials to my governing board, which I think I've heard from you would be helpful. I think that would give this board feedback from a broader, Lafayette sisters. They've all expressed informally that this would be an important model to be able to have, up at Sisters for families that are getting stuck in the snow out in Lafayette because it's so far from other services. So I do think there's an aspect of this model that can be applied pretty broadly throughout the county, and even probably in Jefferson and Crook if they want to borrow from us, if they want to learn from us. So I do think there's value in sharing feedback from the governing board of this office back with this board and vice versa.
We've got, rural church properties in southern Deschutes County, and I think there's willing participants there.
I've heard that too.
So, it brings me back to the fact that, I'm supportive of this. I don't know if we're in disconnected intention here, but I think I was supportive of having this discussion last year, so just look for a while.
Oh, yeah, I'd like to go ahead with the safe parking program. Yeah, I think that's important. And what about road retreat? I read somewhere that they have 100 people in tents. Of course, their climate is mostly different than ours on 1 acre.
So tents obviously smaller.
Right.
And don't require in and out access. And so more individuals can be located with usually structured tents that can support snow. That is what is expressed on that concept plan. Certainly more tents could be made available. However, typically what we'll see is that maybe 2 individuals will stay in an RV and maybe 1 person will stay in a tent. So you could have, 1 10 by 10 tent space for 1 person, maybe 1 or 2. Versus an RV that may be 20 feet, 25 feet, and can support a family. We've sometimes seen, families with a couple of children. I think in this case, I would recommend restricting that children not be located at this site with adult individuals. But I certainly think there's an application where a family site could be located. I think there's probably a number of churches within the faith community that would step up and raise their hands for that kind of an opportunity.
I'm sure there are, aren't there?
So I was talking to Gwen Weisling from Bethlehem 2 weeks ago, where she mentioned that there's been a few beds open at night at Bethlehem Inn regularly. Do you have a feel for that, or is it people just aren't ready? Or even in the coldest nights of the year, there's been a few beds open.
Yeah, so that's typical. That is a high barrier shelter. So someone can't just walk in and get a bed that night. They have to go through a screening process, which I believe includes a background screen. And so what we typically see with high barrier sheltering is that you will have a little bit of capacity. The next day someone might be ready to move in, their background check comes in and they're moved in. That is also a time limited shelter space, whereas the emergency shelters that are delivered by the city are very low barrier. Someone can walk in that day. They often they're over capacity. So technically they, have 100 beds, but they can go, especially on cold nights, they go. So that's why I think you'd see that. And that would be typical. I don't see that as unusual for that type of program.
You mentioned the screening at Bethlehem, and the parameters would be different, but this 1 acre site, for example, there wouldn't be no screening. There would be some levels of screening before you move in there.
Sure. So almost always with these programs, staff from a number of partners who are familiar with the clients involved will have what's called a case conference. And it's essentially a planning meeting to discuss the needs and behavioral challenges that might come up for individual clients. And they'll also talk with the client, is this something that would be comfortable for you? What concerns do you see for yourself? And so we could talk about what that screening process looks like. I would always leave those recommendations and decisions to program staff because they're the professionals when it comes to determining who's going to be able to be safe and successful in the program.
So we're getting down to it a little bit. What's the will of the board here?
We discussed a number of things. I think Nick at least got a nod from all of us that we're interested in a safe parking ordinance. I'm supportive of moving forward with the the county taking on responsibility for the contracting of this 1 acre, of the operation of this 1 acre site, and also continuing to explore additional sites and what's necessary at the, from a land use perspective to make that possible. For sure.
Cheyenne, this design for the 1 acre, is it fenced all the way around it then? Is that what I see on the
It
plan?
would be.
Okay, all right, good. Right, no, I think it's good that we get going on the safe parking, modify the letter, and then the 1 acre site with security. I don't, Les Schwab is an important, it's going to be our neighbor, and I think we've got to be really good neighbors back. And I know they're not excited about it. So the history from Hummel Road is, you look at what happened to the motel people that stayed in those cars, all the businesses there have been incredibly impacted. So we cannot have a chance that happening if we're moving people down by Les Schwab and the neighborhood too.
I can say that Central Oregon Villages has done an incredible amount of community outreach and safety planning, both for individuals who are vulnerable as well as their new neighbors. And I think that this office will continue supporting those conversations to develop a plan that's workable and realistic. I think given the funding constraints, we can expect that it may be a range of options that could be presented back to the county. If there's an additional funding ask, I think we would need to identify a funding source. And I know that, there's an interest from the board to limit the county's financial contributions. If that's maybe up for conversation, I'm happy to bring a suite of options that include security. So I think what I can commit to from this office, I'll continue working with nonprofits and our providers to bring a range of options and a range of either funding sources or other solutions. It could be for this parcel and then for any future parcels.
One thing I would say about security and public safety is that it is, I think, a really nice thing that Central Oregon Villages has a very recently retired police chief at the center of their work, who I'm sure is approaching security and public safety concerns very thoughtfully as he advises these projects. So, I mean, we could come back. You could come back with enhanced security package and a dollar figure, or I would also encourage coming back with retired Police Chief Jim Porter to kind of unpack the strategy for security and public safety associated with these sites as well.
And I'm going to venture a guess that I'm assuming City of Bend would commit police time to do a review of the space and help us make that plan.
So Commissioner Dare, you're supportive of contracting for the operation of this site?
I am.
And yeah, I mean, I'll acknowledge that it looks like this is the first of a couple sites. So we've got to have a close, trusting relationship and communication path here. I just felt like it was as I say, the dynamics of the situation. City of Bend Council tells Commission, hey, we got a great idea. How about you guys go do this? And we have this structure in place of a joint office and a management team, or the other elected officials on this group. So let's just acknowledge some structure here so we know where it's coming from and where we're going. So, and I want to be supportive. Let's do it. Okay.
So there is another dimension of this that we should need to talk about. I believe we need to talk about, which is the timeline. There is the clearing of Hummels is currently scheduled for March 16th, and I cannot see how this 1 acre site, much less any of the other locations we've discussed, is going to be ready by March 16th. So I would like to request that the board take the position that the city council of the city of Bend consider something like a 2 to 3 month delay of that March 16th timeframe for clearing of home, because we're doing, you know, all this planning that we're doing around organized, managed, serviced locations will be wasted if we scatter the people who are currently living at Hunnell to the four winds before these locations are available.
That would also give the board time to receive a response from the governor's office about the letter, which could create more opportunities.
I don't see it as a board of commissioners decision. I don't understand what's being proposed here.
Well,
I mean, this
I mean, part of
interesting.
the impetus for March 16th was it does provide the county roads some benefit in terms of easier access to the south end of County Hunnell Road to be able to go through the south end. And so if we say we relieve that pressure on that March 16th date for a few months, then I think it makes it easier for the city to also step forward and say, yeah, we can offer 2 or 3 more months as well.
But it's a narrative that's not ours. I mean, I don't understand why you think it's a decision space that's ours.
I can also make that request from this office to the city and work on.
And I can comment on this. So we received a request from the county road department to clear this area for.
We should blame it all on Chris,
No,
right?
There's
Chris, are you watching?
There's safety issues, there's a lot of issues, but I think the county's timeline is a factor. So that would be helpful if we had a different timeline from the county road department on their.
But this
needs.
doesn't sound like, my information, we have a project that's gonna happen in that area. And there's gonna be big trucks rolling down that road. It might be prudent to have it clear. But now it's another game of hot potato. It's like, well, the county told us we had to do this. We have to do it by this date. Now the county told us we can delay it. I've never been involved with that. So I don't feel like I'm in a decision spot.
Sure.
I mean, this is just so interesting.
Well, I think there is some.
And you're asking me to make a decision on it now.
Do we need to?
I'm just
hear from
asking
Chris?
that we make a recommendation.
I believe we can hear from Chris.
I mean, yes, we have a project, but
There he is, Chris.
Oh, am I with you?
yes, you're online with us. Thank you for joining us.
All right. So I've been tracking the conversation a little bit here. What is the question that you would like me to specifically address?
Well, I'll just, what I think's going on. So Commissioner Chang said, okay, we've decided to proceed. We're going to, as a county, contract for operation with a partner at this site, south side of Bend. And then closing that up, Commissioner Chang mentioned, well, we should just allow more time.
We need in my opinion, we need a little bit more time before the scheduled March 16th clearing occurs to get some of these sites for people, these authorized managed infrastructure and service sites for people to go to get in place.
Okay.
Who's scheduled on 16?
Yeah, I think I'm getting a sense of the conversation. So our contractor is, in the project area working. We've characterized, giving them or allowing them to access via the southern part of the project would be nice to have versus a got to have. I think by now the contractors kind of figured out that that access isn't something they should be counting on, and have not necessarily had a conversation with us about pressing on any sort of issue with regards to the folks down on Hunnell. I will reiterate that the conversation with the developer in that last quarter-mile section between the northern UGB and Loco Road is evolving. It's becoming pretty apparent that they're going to be in there developing that property not that long after we would be done with the project and that connecting segment between Loco and the UGB. And the conversations basically are, let's not build something that would be immediately tossed by the developer. Let's look to have them, kind of reroute or provide that final connection on their schedule, which will be, well after our project is complete. We're not anticipating making that connection with our project at this time. if the developer schedule is what they say it is.
Well, so I mean, as I say, we're a board of commissioners, the three of us. We're not in a date setting spot in this whole thing. There's a lot of moving parts.
Yeah, I want to reiterate, we've never asked the city to clear the Hunnell Road area. We've provided them with what we feel are, impacts from our project, both during construction and post-construction. A lot of that has changed to the degree that, if everyone's pointing at the Deschutes County Road Department's project as being the impetus to clear by March 16th, I don't think that's the case anymore. Right, wrong, or indifferent. The developer will be making that final connection, not too long after our project is complete, along with the ODOT work, along with the developer building a 30-foot deep sewer trench right down Loco Road, possibly, that would also create some sort of, issue with regards to safety in that area. So there's a lot of moving parts, but I wouldn't call our project being the one that's driving the ship right now.
So I'll ask coordinated response on this and the city of Bend. Would it be helpful or meaningful for county roads to send you a formal letter kind of outlining what Chris just?
We're functioning off of information that we received this past summer from the county road department around safety concerns. So if things have changed, we'd like to see that same information in writing from the county to act differently. So I think that's totally fair.
We've been communicating with the developer and how they're trying to phase their plan now at this point. Everything is somewhat dependent on their schedule. But and of course, we've been communicating with city staff, on a monthly basis, both through the summer and very recently as well. So I don't think there's any, we can certainly provide details to what I've just described, but this is information that the city's had available to them for some time.
So as I say, I'm still in the same spot where we've committed to take X location and put X amount of people here, and it's going to have a natural flow. It's just going to have a natural timeline. So, it's a disconnect for us to say, let's not do it by this date, but do it by that date. I might have done something.
Would you like to see Hunnell cleared before this site is up and running?
If a large truck has to drive down the middle of Hunnell Road, I want it to be as safe as possible.
This office can work closely with the city and with the county's staff and contractors to develop a phased safety approach to ensuring that Hunnell is cleared in the safest way possible for all involved. That includes service providers that are going to be, assisting with packing and moving. And what I can commit to is bringing a more refined timeline for establishment back to this board for review. It may not be first approval.
Well, at this point, it's public information. There's a lot of people following this. So, we have a public meeting and we put a timeline out. Let's share it with the world. As I say, let's, whatever decision space is by the Board of Commissioners.
But we're really, at best, we're only talking about citing 50 people from Hunnell Road if we have 80 to 100 people there. So we have another job to do, and we're not done.
Exactly.
Right.
And our office continues to look for other parcels that do meet the same criteria. And we'll wait for the governor's response on the waiver request so that we can understand if other parcels might be eligible. And I will continue to bring those as concepts for further baking in this process. And Eric and I have both been taking notes from your feedback, so it's super helpful to get a little bit more clear on next steps.
Great. Well, and so one other concept, City Council had their work session, and it was mentioned that the county, since this is a public health crisis, the county should step up. Let's work together on that. Let's define what that means. That's, once again, just throwing something over the fence to tell somebody else what to do. So let's make sure we're communicating, please.
Yeah, and as, you know, as bumpy as these negotiations have been in the last month or so, or as, you know, dramatic where, you know, don't appreciate the language or whatever. I think that's what we're doing is we're a whole bunch of people learning to do a new dance together. And hopefully there'll be less stepping on toes in the future.
I'm seeing a cover for the Source Weekly out of that conversation.
And we're part of that equation.
Yes, we are.
To summarize, first off, my late grandmother, who loved me very much, once told me I have 2 left feet.
There you go. Oh, I do too. My wife gets mad at me if I try to dance.
To summarize, it sounds like the board is asking staff to do 4 things. First is to redraft the letter or make the updates to the governor. Second,
Well, and then route for review for all of us tomorrow or whatever, so we can.
okay, we'll get you draft tomorrow and we'll talk at the board meeting. Action item number 2 is to schedule a work session to talk about safe parking in the county. Action item number 3 is to work with city event staff on an IGA for the 1 acre parcel. And then the 4th item is to work with Central Oregon villages if their board supports moving forward. So working with them on a contract.
Is this with directly awarding a contract with Central Oregon villages, is that in any way problematic from a procurement perspective?
Yeah. Or no?
Do we need to run a solicitation of some kind, or can we just do that?
I think we would have to go through an RFP process.
Or could we do emergency procurement? Why don't we talk to legal?
We'll look into that.
And we're happy to assist. Our legal counsel has helped us with similar situations, so.
Yeah. Well, and an RFP in a complicated situation like this with people that are informed is, yeah, I mean, we're looking for this service. Who can do it? Not a lot of people can raise their hands.
And
And if more people do,
if somebody else steps forward.
it's good. It's good. We got another site.
Yes.
Yeah.
All get 3 bids. Maybe end up with 1.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. 2-item agenda today.
Wow.
And we have other items. Thanks, everybody, for following this topic.
Thank you.
And we may be on the phone soon, because I didn't call you earlier today. Go ahead with other items, Nick.
Okay, thank you, Commissioners. We have good news from our lobbyist, Doug Riggs, and thanks to our legislative delegation that there's a hearing scheduled on Senate Bill 644 Wednesday morning regarding rural accessory dwelling units and how to navigate that with the wildfire mitigation standards. Doug has asked for a 1-pager on that, and then he's also asked that if possible for a commissioner to testify in person, and of course we have a board meeting that day. Will is briefed and I think ready to go on what either amendments or clarifications or any comments might look like for the board's consideration, and commissioners may or may not have different perspectives on.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Nice empty room for you.
But the goal is for us to be prepared for Wednesday, both in terms of a 1-pager, what amendments we would like to see, and whether a commissioner wishes to attend in person. So kind of three pieces.
And the weather doesn't look too bad, so I can, at noon.
Yeah, you're already a half hour towards that if you go home. So.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm really close to Salem.
Before Will starts, I will say that like 10 minutes before I walked in here, I saw a -2 limit.
Oh,
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Thank you. Of course, Peter Gutowski out on a well-deserved vacation this week. I'm filling in from picked up some emails over the weekend on this topic, and so our lobbyist Doug Riggs had suggested, just as Nick discussed, that we were looking into having some sort of response to this agenda, to this sub 1 and now maybe sub 2 modifications to Senate Bill 644. Of course, this is an attempt to decouple in some ways the ADUs from the fire hardening and defensible space standards, where they're currently intertwined, and we're waiting for those fire standards to allow the construction of those much needed ADUs in the county. And so Doug had recommended that we send a one-page letter, which he provided a rough draft of. With your instructions, I can tidy that up a little bit so that it matches all the current status of the Senate bill, and just a couple code references to be tidied up, so I can definitely draft that. He had also, as Nick mentioned, recommended that someone testify in person with regard to the importance of this work.
I've already, I signed up to testify by Zoom, but if you want to send somebody in person, then that might be valuable as well. I do have an ongoing relationship with Senator Golden, so I would like to see me testify, but
I have a relationship with him too. I testified for 3 years on the original bill, and he said he was sure glad I never gave up. So, I would appreciate being there if I can. We don't have any blizzards tomorrow in the afternoon.
You're off and to drive.
Right.
Great.
Well,
Okay.
because it does make a difference if you are there in person, that it's incredibly important. And then, of course, I have my other Senate Bill 673, which I have a call on in half an hour with Senator Taylor about that one. So another affordable housing bill.
So then if you're able to testify, you can join our board meeting remotely.
Right, I can do it on Zoom. Can I?
Okay, yeah.
It's not that long of a meeting, I don't think.
It's about an inch thick.
I know, but it doesn't look, time-wise, it
Yeah,
looks like
no.
it's the morning, it's 9 to 11 or something. Of course, that could be 9 to 4, right?
the other thing that I did not get clarification yet on was that the hearing on SB 644 is scheduled after a whole bunch of work sessions on other bills. So even though they're starting, that Natural Resources Committee starts at 8, I don't know what that means in terms of when the testimony opportunity actually is going to happen.
Well, we can be real flexible, because if you're scheduled to do it remotely and if she's to try to go, we can work with Doug Riggs, just get a best estimate, and either we start our board meeting or not, and then work around it a little bit. So this is a good one for Deschutes County. It sounds like we're all wanting to say something on the topic. So for today, let's acknowledge that we'll have to just be flexible on Wednesday, possibly.
Yeah, we can. I mean, one option could be to, we do in that schedule public
A
hearing.
public hearing, so you
Okay.
can't mess with it.
Okay.
We have a 9 o'clock scheduled.
Okay, that's good. Thank you.
Yeah, not right at 9, but yeah, it says 9 for 9:15 or 9:20, whatever we get to it. Well, and we'll work around that too. I mean, we're just acknowledging it on Monday. that
Which one is it?
Wednesday, maybe.
It's the road agency.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
So we're going to convene as 911 and Deschutes County Board of Commissioners to do an intergovernmental agreement. But it should just, once we get started with that process, it should click through pretty good.
It's possible, once the meeting starts, if you get through the hearing, maybe to take a recess if you wish for an hour. I mean,
Yeah.
for a period of
Yeah, we
time,
might do that.
and then to come back just so that whoever.
Or even till 1 o'clock, you know.
Yeah, okay. So we have some.
It's also, we should figure out the logistics, but then we should also talk about the substance of actually what's happening.
Well, that's exactly what I was thinking next. Get back to, so -1 and -2, sounds like -2 acknowledge, and it's something about either everything goes into for a period of time or for the rest of time is some of the differences in -1 and -2.
And I haven't seen the -2 yet. So we with your direction, I would collect that information about the -2, work with Doug to put together kind of a one-pager that you can use both to deliver at that, and provide the testimony and to give yourself some context on what's being discussed.
Okay, so let's start at the beginning. What's the bill number?
644.
644 in this session. And what's the main content of this bill? What's it trying to do?
The main content, so Senate Bill 391 in combination with 762 had set up a scenario where ADUs would be allowed subject to defensible space and fire hardening standards
In areas mapped as high and extreme.
and areas mapped as high and extreme.
So 644 disconnects the fire map from accessory development unit opportunity if we build to the highest standard.
That's
I'm just making sure that's what we're talking about here.
It is.
I would
The
say
water parcel must be at least 2 acres.
not exactly.
Well, but I mean, that's what we were looking for to start with.
What 644 did was it eliminated, basically, it eliminated any requirements related to amendment. The -1 went the opposite direction, which is what I was interested in, and said, not eliminating wildfire resiliency measures, but allowing you to proceed with an ADU before the maps are done, as long as you use wildfire resiliency measures. The problem with the -1 was that it didn't specify that requirement would end at a certain point in time when the maps were completed. So essentially, what it would do, if I'm reading it correctly, essentially what it would do, if you were in a moderate or low risk area, it would require you to use wildfire resiliency measures regardless, and regardless of what the mapping specified later on. So there might be a whole lot of moderate and low risk Central Oregonians, Deschutes County residents and people in other parts of the state might be mad to have to do wildfire resiliency measures when it's not really relevant. So the -2 tries to patch that. I just looked at it very quickly, but it does take a different approach, but it does a better job of saying, this is the way things will work until the maps are done.
So in Deschutes County, on a hot wind-driven fire event in August or September, we've determined that pretty much anywhere could be under a fire hazard, anywhere in the county. Open lands, forest lands, urban, rural, anywhere.
When we saw the first SB 762 maps those draft maps, they hold them back and you can't even look at them now. There was substantial amounts of Deschutes County that were in moderate risk.
I'm just pointing out that we're kind of 80-20, and yes, we can support the optimization for the -2 amendment, but either way, we're very excited about 644. I think, would that be the common message we have? Or maybe not excited,
I
supportive.
Yeah, well, I would be somewhat supportive of the -1, and I'd be very supportive of the -2. I think
That's kind of my point. I think we're all there.
But we are not talking about it the right way. I mean, to say that we have decoupled,
Understood.
Or that we
So setting
decoupled, or
up
that
a
we've
period of time.
eliminated those requirements is not an accurate. It's not an accurate description of the bill as it now stands.
Setting up the opportunity for a period of time while waiting for the fire maps.
And ensuring
There's an
that,
extra copy.
and ensuring that stuff isn't getting built that's not wildfire resilient during that time.
Yeah. Right?
So will you come up with something then?
Yes, I need to see the -2. I'm
Right,
working
I've got
from
one.
yesterday's newspaper here.
They're not posted yet.
Yeah, we just
We will.
we can.
Okay,
Yesterday's newspaper had Dilbert in it.
yes. All right, so I'll move forward with aiding that. We'd like to get that draft letter for you together. And if there's anything else as we move forward, we'll track that minute by minute. And if there's anything we can do to help, let us know as you prepare for that testimony.
Thank you. And thank you, Commissioner, for getting out there.
Well,
If you end up there. This Wednesday morning.
I know I'm going tomorrow, if it's possible, because it's 8 a.m. And I know I sat there for an hour and a half one day for my test, but it was.
It's good to have you in the room, though. They know Deschutes County's there.
So the message is, can we do something about the audio for these meetings? The audio quality is poor, the closed captioning is broken, as a result, not accessible.
So Brenda and I were just speaking in the hall. We can ask to take a look at the closed captioning function. I wasn't aware that that wasn't working, but we're in the middle of stage 1 and 2 of this project. So microphones are going to be installed next week in this room. That will be dropped right above the table. So that should, we're hopeful that that will help audio quality.
Okay, great. Just pass it along.
Nope, I appreciate it.
Good.
So just staying on 644 for a moment, they've asked for a one pager. Doug gave us some talking points. And so if the board is comfortable based on what we heard today for Will to just kind of capture that into a letter and just, perhaps we just put it on the community development letterhead, since we don't have time to get it back to the board for formal approval and sign it. Doug's hoping to have something as early
I
as.
support that with the logo of the county on it.
Yeah,
With the minutes of this meeting showing its support.
Okay.
I definitely like to see it before you said it.
Oh, that's fine.
Okay, thank you. You just wanted to close the loop on getting the one pager.
Yeah, appreciate that.
Okay.
I just have to say, I think my house was built in 2005, and the standards on my house are so good for living in a wildfire zone that, I just can't imagine that somebody would be allowed to build something that wasn't appropriate. And that was a long time ago. I thought I had wood siding and I was trying to hammer one day, and oh my gosh, it was not. I should have put a nail in.
That's kind of the whole point of this thing, that there have been people who have been arguing against these wildfire resilient building materials and saying that it's going to make building so difficult and it's going to cost so much more. But basically all of the measures that are required are standard practices already. So the insistence, the insistence that we have those wildfire resilient building material requirements is only in reaction to people who are trying to say that they don't want them.
Well, some people believe that private property and rights are being taken away, but with more rules and regulations in place.
Right.
In my experiences, our house is fire resilient, and there was no choices that I even made when it was built. So, it is standard practice. I absolutely agree.
It's standard practice. And, I guess to folks who would say, don't tell me how to build my house, I would say, if your house catches on fire and it's raining embers on your neighbor's house, then that is a responsibility that you should take some part in.
Okay, what's next? That's all that I have for other items today. Thank you. Commissioner Dare, did you have something?
Oh, I did bring a copy of this
Oh, yeah,
letter
yeah.
from Lynn County.
Yep.
And several people sent it. And remembering the state audit, the hotline costs $7,000 a call, 100 callers and 28 apps for addiction recovery service assistance. So that was from information from the audit. So anyway, just thought we should see what Lynn County's doing.
Okay. Thanks for sharing that.
Dr. Mirren also said from the weather that happened in Portland that she was really thinking that the deaths from fentanyl use and freezing to death, those numbers, when they come out, are going to be pretty awful.
Yeah, that's a very complicated situation because they're not used to snow, is my point. Yeah, they're
Right.
totally covered for that. So there's a Redmond, City of Redmond discussion about Oasis Village that I'm involved in. So and Eric was there. So this is going to be every other week. The mayor and Finch just started the process. So there was just a meeting last Thursday. So we'll see where that all goes. A little bit of email traffic, kind of the full on, Oasis Village, Bob Bohag, James Cook, city staff. Just one of those things that got started at the mayor's request.
And they also talked about wanting to do RV parking at lower than market rate. Rick Russell talked about possible interest in managing that. Of course, it would be on county property. Look at that conceptual plan. So those conversations just started as well.
Yeah, so it's just kind of a resetting, a real good discussion place. So we'll see where that goes.
So, bearing out your questions from earlier about why are we having these individual discussions with the city of Bend about these sites at the same time that we have the coordinated homeless response office. Do you think that these one-on-one meetings with the city of Redmond about Oasis Village are valuable?
I'm very involved in making all kinds of.
But it just seemed like earlier you were saying, like, why do we even need to have these discussions with the city of Bend if we have the coordinated homeless response office? But this Oasis Village situation seems like.
So as I say, you and I have I think of it as an impedance mismatch. We're speaking English, but we're not communicating very well. So no, I don't mind being involved at all. And I don't mind getting engaged and even making decisions. And I'm engaged in Redmond. The way this is flowing, it feels like I'm getting partial information, and we've been asked to make a decision with other implications behind it. Yeah, just the way the information is flowing here isn't good. That's all.
I've got a phone call that I need to go.
You don't want us to hear us debate for another 20 minutes?
No, I don't. I need to go.
So as I say, communication,
I do.
Chuck Hemingway walks in the room, and I just called him earlier. I left a message for Jim Porter, and him and I texted back and forth. I'm engaged in this in 14 different levels, but it's weird that we're, in the end, it's just like this hot potato thrown over a fence about, well, the county better just pick this up. So that's all I'm saying. We do everything in public here, except these weird things that come at us sometimes. And as I say, we can communicate. I don't mind. We may have to learn how to dance. Now that thoughts in my head. We're good. So yeah, I just shared with you. Redmond, the mayor asked to have a meeting, and I attended it. And
very good. I'm glad that those discussions are happening.
I'm glad you're glad. We better just stop here. Anything else? Okay. So, meeting adjourned. Thank you. Yeah, 6. You want to meet up here again next Monday and just speak more loudly, or do you want to meet downstairs one more time? Any preference? Yeah, I am. We're meeting there.